5 amazing things you probably don't know about the space race. The space race was a high-stakes competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. The unofficial rivalry began shortly after World War II but began to fade after Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon on July 20, 1969. The United States had triumphed. It ended abruptly with the disintegration of the Soviet Union in 1991. While we are certainly aware of some familiar facts concerning the space race, there are several others that we are not aware of. We're going to talk about 5 astounding facts about space that you probably didn't know. Number 1. Zambia has entered the space race. Zambia is a country that is rarely mentioned. It is a landlocked country located in south-central Africa. It entered the space race in 1964, intending to land a man on the moon before the United States or the Soviet Union. The Zambian space program was a private project of Edward Mukuka Nkoloso, a schoolteacher and the founder of Zambia's National Academy of Science, Space Research, and Philosophy. Mukuka recruited 12 potential astronauts for the planned lunar landing, including a 16-year-old girl named Martha Mwamba. Mukuka's space project lacked funds. The Zambian government was uninterested in collaborating, and the United Nations, the United States, the Soviet Union, and Israel had all turned down his financial requests. Despite this, he continued to teach his astronauts with an old drum he found to simulate flight conditions. The trainee astronauts entered the drum, which was then rolled around a tree or down a hill. Mukuka believed that walking on one's hands was the only way a human could ever walk on the moon. The whole event was so amusing that international reporters began to dismiss it as a joke. Mukuka never specified his purpose, despite the fact that he appeared to be serious about it. "I'll be laughing the day I plant Zambia's flag on the moon," he once told an interviewer. When the trainee astronauts began asking for money, the space program collapsed. 2 of Mukuka's top astronauts also became alcoholic and never returned for training. A third joined a film crew. When the lone female trainee astronaut became pregnant, the program came to an end. Number 2. Astronaut, Cosmonaut or Taikonaut. Why are space explorers referred to differently in the United States, the Soviet Union, and China? NASA refers to its astronauts as astronauts, while Russia refers to them as cosmonauts and China refers to them as Takonauts. It all started during the space race. The US and the Soviet Union were such fierce rivals that they couldn't agree on a single moniker for space travelers. The US chose astronaut, whereas the Soviets chose cosmonaut. International astronauts on Russian or American spacecraft are familiar with the name used by the host country. When China began launching humans into space, it also gave their astronauts a name. It debated calling them Chinanauts before settling on Yuan, which translates to space navigator. Number 3. The Soviets also planned to nuke the moon. Most individuals have heard about the infamous Project A-119. It was the United States' effort to nuke the moon. Surprisingly, the Soviet Union appears to have shared similar thoughts, other than establishing that they were the leaders of the space race. Neither nation had a practical rationale for nuking the moon. After landing on the moon, the Soviet Union intended to bomb it. The plan was to send a man to the moon to plant a flag. Then they dropped a nuclear weapon to establish that they were the first to land on the moon. People viewing from Earth would be able to see the explosions flash and mushroom cloud. The Soviets eventually concluded that nuking the moon was a bad idea, because there was no atmosphere. The mushroom cloud would never form. The flare of the explosion would also be so fleeting that humans on Earth would not know anything had happened. Instead, the Soviets chose to send turtles to the moon. Number 4. Buzz Aldrin should have been the first man on the moon. As the world prepared Apollo 11's launch, journalists and NASA officials predicted that Buzz Aldrin would be the first man to set foot on the moon. This should have been true because the astronaut in the right seat of the previous Gemini spacecraft, which was replaced by Apollo, was always the first to leave the ship. Aldrin sat in the Apollo 11's right seat. The Apollo's door, however, had been relocated to the left side. This indicated that the man in the left seat, in this case Neil Armstrong, would take off first. If Aldrin was to be the first man on the moon, he would have to climb over Armstrong. During his trials on Earth, Aldrin attempted to climb over Armstrong. He failed and ended up destroying the test module. Some NASA officials also believed that because Neil Armstrong was the module commander, he should be the first person to set foot on the moon. Number 5. Some think the Soviet Union won the space race. The United States won the space race on July 20, 1969, when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon. However, other analysts argue that the Soviet Union was the true winner, given that the moon landing was only one of the few space achievements achieved by the United States. The Soviets achieved more milestones than the United States. In 1957, the Soviet Union launched the first satellite into orbit. The same year, It also launched the first animal into space on April 12, 1961. 4 years later, the Soviets launched the first man into space. That man's name was Yuri Gagarin. Gagarin's flight was followed by another with 2 cosmonauts. It was the first time in history when 2 individuals flew to space in the same spaceship. The Soviets sent the first woman into space, Valentina Tereshkova. In 1963, Alexei Leonov made the first spacewalk 2 years later. For budgetary concerns, the Soviet Union was unable to sustain its lead. The state needed funds for more critical things, such as food and housing for its residents. This slowed its space program, which was quickly surpassed by the United States. It eventually lost out after the United States landed on the moon. So, there you have it. 5 fascinating facts regarding the space competition between the United States and the Soviet Union. So signing off and peace out.